And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Spartan Stadium, Michigan State Spring Showcase. Spring practice comes to an end. 15 practices down. Michigan State comes out of it. Entertaining football, I thought today. Cold weather, the crowd was down. But overall, first of all, no one was hurt that I saw. Christian Phillips was limping a little bit. I know that he was kind of dinged up at some points of the practice. He started at left guard today. But Michigan State played some real football today. And came out of it unscathed health-wise. That's the first thing. Secondly, Michigan State fans got to see a lot of new players make some plays. Nick Marsh, Aidan Chiles, got to look at Tommy Schuster, Quindarius Dunnigan. A lot of interesting things for Michigan State fans to process coming out of this. Overall, the offense wins something like 31-28. I don't know, something like that.
31-24.
31-24. Offense wins a scrimmage. They didn't win the previous two scrimmages this spring. Jonathan Smith said it looked like real football out there. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good day for Michigan State football.
I think it was really good from the showcase standpoint, but from a football standpoint, I think I took more out of this spring game than I take out of most. Organization, number one thing to me. All three, every three strings, ones, twos, and threes, everyone was in position out there when they needed to be. I was super impressed with the offensive line and how they operated ones, twos, and threes. If you didn't know, just from a structural, functional standpoint, if you didn't know which unit was out there, to me that's a good thing. And I saw guys running plays, the same tight end type plays where you've got a tight end spread out wide, come in. You had a lot of moving parts, and they didn't look like out of place. They didn't look out of time, out of sync, and that really impressed the heck out of me from an organizational, structural standpoint on both sides of the ball. I think a lot of times you see things that are a little bit janky in spring ball, especially when you start mixing and matching pieces. But I was really, really impressed with the operation on offense. I was impressed with the operation on defense, and guys were moving around. It was, I know Coach Smith said afterwards, talked about it being vanilla. If that's vanilla, I don't know what it's going to look like in the fall, because they did a lot of different things formationally. They did a lot of different things structurally on both sides of the football, and I was impressed from a football standpoint. This is a good coaching staff. They know what they want to do. They know what they're doing, and they've got guys executing at a higher level than I expected them to. Other signs, in my opinion, that things have really moved in a better direction. Tackling, was really good. There was no obvious bust. There were plays made downfield, but in a lot of instances, those were made in, like the first play to Montori Foster, that pass from Aidan Chiles, that was made within a window of the defense, and there weren't any obvious really noticeable busts. And short yardage, all the things that you want to look at and say these are things that you can judge an organization or the structure or just kind of how you run your program. I think Michigan State checked off all the boxes from a program standpoint.
I agree with that. There were no illegal procedures, no false starts, no offsides, first of all. There was one play where the offense had to call a timeout basically because the tight end was late getting on the field. Other than that, operation was pretty smooth. Interesting to watch Michigan State football with a huddle, play football with a huddle on offense, under center. Play action, bootlegs, half boots, and things like that. Different brand of football, but it's buttoned down pretty good. You can see the direction that it's headed. Yeah. They don't feel like they feel like they've got a lot of work to do. They said practice 15, which was today, was like night and day on both sides of the ball compared to practice 1. Learning how to communicate, learning how to practice, all those things. Sounds like things were kind of scattered early on, which is understandable. But pretty good football today. 61 plays in all in the scrimmage. I think 14 possessions, something like that. And solid. At the end of the game, the offense was in 4-minute form. They had the lead, so they played with the lead to try to evaporate the rest of the clock. 4-minute drill, picked up a first down, took a knee. I don't know when I've seen a spring game end with a knee, but they were trying to play a simulated game, and it stayed true to those roots, and it ended up being pretty entertaining. Aidan Chiles today, 7 out of 14. You made the point that he was operating against the first-string defense all day. Tommy Schuster had a good day going against the second-team defense, or it's a little bit third-string sometimes. But Schuster looked good. Chiles had some good moments. The new quarterbacks at Michigan State, both of those guys look like they're capable.
Yeah, and I think one of the things in spring is there is tendency, once you get to that second string, there tends to be a drop-off, especially so now in the portal era and with as many moving parts as there are in a college football team. So I think Michigan State is a pretty good spot for the most part with their first spring, and I thought Aidan Chiles did a heck of a job. I don't think he forced very much. There's one time where he got out of the pocket, and you can really see those elite wheels that he possesses. That's something that bodes well for the future. I thought he showed some really good chemistry with Montori Foster. That was, he threw 3 passes to Montori Foster. Those were all from Aidan Chiles, and in Montori Foster, he played very well with the ones. I like what the ones were able to do running the football, and I think to me. The twos they ran a little bit, but you look at one of the things that the ones really did is you saw them run the football concertedly and do so in a very impressive fashion. I thought Aidan Chiles' touchdown pass to Nathan Carter was really a nice pass. It was nice by Carter because that's a facet of his game that was kind of underdeveloped or under-touted. I don't know how you want to refer to that, but we've always heard of Nathan Carter as a between the tackles runner, not much for a passing game or as a receiver. Maybe that's because Jalen Berger was there last year and they're trying to give some props to Berger because that's what he does well. But Nathan Carter, we've heard several times this spring that he can catch the ball well out of the backfield, and Chiles threw him a nice ball today. He did a nice job catching a pass. It's not easy to catch for a running back. I thought he did a really good job. But the balance between the run and the pass, with the ones against the ones, that was really impressive to me. Especially when you consider what we've heard all spring long, that the defense was significantly ahead of the offense. What happened in those first 2 scrimmages, the defense, I'm not going to say dominated, but controlled the offense. So for the offense to come out and be able to run the football and throw the football, and to do it without gimmicks is a really impressive thing to me, and it shows a lot of growth, and it gives me a lot of excitement if I'm a Michigan State fan to know that, hey, these guys look like they can run the football. Some of the interior run blocking was phenomenal today compared to what we're used to seeing in the last 4 years. And I know it's a different type of run blocking style, but I have a lot more confidence that these guys are going to be able to pick up 3rd and short if they have to run the football than what I was the last 4 years.
I'm confident that the package is going to present defenses with a solid, capable running attack. The question is, if you're doing well today, you're doing it well against Michigan State defensive players, which begs the question: is there anything?
But those guys also made plays, which you want to see. I thought. So the one thing that I would say with the defense is the biggest thing that they have to adjust to, in my opinion, is the scheme. It puts more on where linebackers they're going to get engaged more with offensive linemen, and that's something that is an adjustment. So if Michigan State's offensive linemen are playing at a high level, and they're being physical and they're getting to those linebackers, and those guys aren't used to seeing that because they haven't had that to this point in the spring, that's a new deal. I saw Jordan Hall on multiple occasions get carved up by an offensive lineman, and to me that's something that's like really encouraging. The fact that they're getting out there, I think that I've got enough confidence in Joe Rossi. I get enough confidence in the personnel that they have that I think that you want to see some give and take, and I think Michigan State made some nice plays on defense, and they had some loud plays from a lot of different players on defense. But that is a new element. If the offensive line is suddenly taking a step, then you're getting to that linebacker level, and those guys have to learn how to adjust to it. I don't think they've seen a whole lot of that this spring, and I think today was an eye-opening deal for a guy like Jordan Hall, who's been a pretty good linebacker and will continue to be, but that's the next step for those guys, is learning how to deal with the offensive linemen.
Yeah, and it reminds me, I go back and watch some Oregon State stuff. You'll see those offensive linemen with some of the zone schemes, the way they get out to linebackers, and it's part of their scheme. And part of that is whatever you see your defensive surface is, knowing who's going out and who's taking care of, who's down blocking and who's able to release based on who's out of the gap and those type of things. And those have to be things that they know right away, which allows them to get out. Then from there, you have the athleticism to get out on people. It reminds me of the old Barry Alvarez offensive lines. I think they had a center named Al Johnson years ago that used to get out quickly on linebackers and cut them off. When Glenn Mason had it going in Minnesota with some of their zone blocking schemes, similar, and that's part of what they're putting together here. And as long as they're all on the same page and they have some quickness to go with it, it can be a bear. Yeah. And then you make it physical out of that with some physical running, one cut and downhill. Interesting, some of the things that I think Nate Carter was talking about just the difference in between in making sure you are 7 yards deep or however whatever
Attention to detail,
whatever the depth needs to be, and that's universal across all offenses. But he says even more so in this, that if he needs to be 7 yards deep on a given play, because 8 yards the timing and the angles are going to be just a little bit off. That seems like a new thing for him in terms of the exactness of some of those parts of this running attack, which gave people problems in the Pac-12 in 2023 and especially 2022.
To me, that's kind of a damning statement, because I've heard that said in the past when running backs, like I remember Javon Ringer talking about that being like a certain amount of yards deep. But if you're saying that like it's a new thing, that to me is it's one of those quality control things where I think that this staff might they are going to be better, because I think KB is a great, Keith Banafa is a really good running backs coach, and you could see it. You could see it today, and the offensive line blocked great, but every single running back out there that ran the ball today did some good things. And, those guys ran the ball the right way. I'm not saying that a guy like Martinez, number 25, is going to be a guy that runs in the game unless it's a blowout type of situation. But running backs, they were very, very good with their plays. And that attention to detail stuff I think that's universal within this offense. So there's a lot of demanding of doing your job the right way. But to me, that's kind of inexcusable of not being exactly where you need to be. I would, I can't imagine that wouldn't get called out. But if it hasn't in the past, then, that's part of the problem.
You're also hearing players talk about the way this coaching staff is very personable. Yeah. They talk about it in relation to what they were used to last year.
Yeah.
And there's a contrast
it's
there.
It's kind of sad.
Was it Darius Snow saying that, last year they might not talk to the coaches for, a few days, even a few weeks? Some coaches after we know Mel Tucker was kind of going downhill at this time last year, but then you end up, there was no communication. That's part of the reason Peyton Thorne left.
But honestly, if your head
strange.
Coach is going downhill, to me that would be a reason why there'd be more open door policy with the assistant coaches. Those are the guys that usually pick up for it. Like Joe Paterno in his last days at Penn State. To be honest with you, I don't know how much, how much he was really coaching. So if your head coach is not in the game, then to me there's more open door policy with the assistant coaches. So I think we heard a lot about chemistry and family last year at this time, and maybe even in the fall. But I think what we're hearing right now isn't just lip service. Those guys, talking to a lot of different guys. Coaches have had players over to their houses. Like Keith Banafa was talking about how he wants his players to see him around his family, to see him how he interacts with his children, how he interacts with his wife. He wants them to realize that he's not just a football coach, he's a person outside of football, just like they want him to realize that they're people, not just football players. So you're seeing that around across the board. I think some of that was taken for granted. Like, when we covered the D'Antonio era, there was a lot of that type of stuff, and there was a lot of team building, and there's a lot of like bonding type things. And I think, covering that all those years, I kind of just took it for granted. But we're seeing a lot of the same type of things resurface this year. Some of the things that we've seen for years over with the basketball program, where guys are encouraged to spend time with each other, they're encouraged to spend time with their coaches. And to me, hearing those guys talk about what it was like last year, and not doing so with a sour grapes type of mentality, they're just comparing and contrasting. It makes me feel kind of sad for those guys, because they're kind of missing out, or have missed out on something that a lot of players that came up through the D'Antonio era, a lot of Michigan State basketball players that came up through Izzo's program, they kind of take for granted and think that that's normal, but it's not.
It seems like the players are refreshed. It seems like this whole thing is refreshing to them. And I think Dylan Tatum was talking. I think it was Tatum that said something after the game today about spending time to get to know the names of the players on the roster. Was it he that said something like that? And that's congruent with what Jonathan Smith was saying at the high school coaches convention in Lansing back in January when he was speaking to high school coaches across the country, across the state. He was saying, he put some pictures up and says sometimes he tests his own players in meetings. He'll pull somebody and say, he'll have a picture of a face and say, who is this person? What's his name? Where's he from? He wants everybody on the program to know every name and face and background of everybody in the roster. It takes more than a few months to get down, but I thought it was interesting that Tatum was like reiterating that's part of the process you're talking about, the family atmosphere, which can which some coaches really harp on that, partly because it creates a more unified situation, but it also helps lead to wins.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like the reorganization of the locker room. I don't know, like where guys are sitting, like guys from different position groups. I don't know if that was a Chris Peterson thing and he gave that to D'Antonio, or if that was a D'Antonio thing, he gave it to Chris Peterson back in the day. But D'Antonio reorganized the locker room after that 2016 season. The one that was like really disastrous for Michigan State coming off the college football playoff appearance, and really worked on those chemistry issues. In 2017, you saw a reorganized locker room where guys weren't by guys in their own position group. People from different parts of the country were by each other, and it really did help. It sounds kind of cheesy, but anything you can do to kind of improve your roster is a big deal. And when you've got a young player, who might be from a different part of the country, if you've got someone that has his back at a different position, a different age group, you just never know what kind of, that might be a reason why he wants to stay there, or it might help him, have the self-confidence to be successful. These are young men that we're talking about, and it's every little bit helps.
Peterson dealt with D'Antonio on that?
I don't know. I'm just wondering because like I'm wondering if Jonathan Smith got that from a Chris Peterson thing.
Okay.
He talks about the chemistry building stuff that Chris Peterson did all the time.
I thought you said D'Antonio. You meant
But D'Antonio also
17?
was doing the same thing. So
Yeah.
I know D'Antonio and Chris Peterson are friends. So I don't know if those two guys ever talked about things that you can do to build chemistry. I know back in those 2010s. Peterson and D'Antonio were, communicating quite a bit, but it seems very similar. There's a lot of branches that kind of like intersect with Mark D'Antonio and what he believed in, and Jonathan Smith and what he believes in. And honestly, after watching the last 4 years, it kind of reinforces what I've always believed in, that relationships do matter when it comes to working for a common goal. And I don't think, especially in this portal era, that you can successfully push for a common goal unless you have strong relationships.
Sure. I thought one of the good quotes this week also from Demetrius Martin, he was talking about his experience in playing defense and preparing defenses to take on Jonathan Smith offenses. He said, they really make it hard on you. And at first blush, it's under center. It might be two back. It might look like old school football, but it is new age NFL pro style, like Brian Lindgren talks about. It might look like old formations, but what they do in terms of establishing the run, getting you leaning toward the run, and then not just short counter boot drags. There's downfield 2-on-1s that do put a lot of pressure on a defense, and a lot of coaches talk. It's kind of cliche type of wording to say that you want to stretch an offense vertically and horizontally, but they truly do. You got to stop the run, but then you got to be worried about not only drag routes or crossers and over routes, but also what they'll do deep with it, and then throwbacks horizontally. They'll make you defend the whole field. Truthfully, we've heard coaches talk about that over the years. These guys coming in from Oregon State, they make you defend that entire field. And if they get the run game going, good luck.
One of the things we've heard from defensive coaches or coaches about Jonathan Smith all spring long is he's three steps ahead of everybody. That Demetrius Martin said it. I've heard other guys say that. Courtney Hawkins was indicating, some of the nuanced stuff with how they run routes, route progressions, different stems. And I just find it interesting because, we're talking about how much they did show on offense, but then again, you didn't see any of the tight ends involved really in the passing game.
Not today, not yet.
And it's funny because like the wide
Adamola had one maybe, but you're right.
He had one target. He had one target, and I know Jack Velling was targeted a couple times, but that's a guy that's like feasted on a lot of stuff. So that's one of those things where you talk about that, and I'm like, that's to me, okay, the offense won the scrimmage, but the fact that the defense took away for the most part, like a tight end component, that says a lot about Rossi, but it also says, something about the versatility in this offense, considering that Michigan State, I wouldn't call wide receiver a strength of the offense. Although Montori Foster, I think, played really well today. I think that Nick Marsh played well. I think a lot of guys were in position to make plays. And I'm kind of wondering if some of the perceived struggles at wide receiver aren't necessarily the result of guys that are trying to learn things that they haven't done before and being slower as a result. Corey Hawkins said the other day that he thinks that guys are playing slower because they were thinking, and he's really excited to see where they are once they, once they have a functional understanding of the offense. My term, not his. But Nick Marsh, Montori Foster, Jerron Glover didn't do anything today. That was a little bit disappointing. But as you said, there's only 61 plays. There's going to be a lot more run plays out here, and so there's a lot more opportunity down the road for guys to do different things because there's a lot of layers to this onion.
Probably only 20 offensive snaps for the first string. Chiles attempts 14 passes. There's not a lot of chances for someone like Glover to make a big impact or Velling, but it'll happen. And it's not exact, but in terms of establishing a running attack and doing it with zone, and they'll run duo and they'll go I formation and physicality and getting the tight ends incorporated, and then all those things we talked about. There's a lot of Harbaugh to that too. Yeah. Maybe not the exact same plays, but the flavor that Harbaugh had the last couple of years when he got it turned around, it's kind of the same brand of football in some ways, without some of the jackassnesses.
Well, it's the new.
Can I say that?
It's the new NFL. Harbaugh is part of that, but you're looking at the old West Coast offense with more vertical passing stuff, and you're looking at some of the stuff the Rams did. In recent years, some of the stuff the Lions are doing right now, all the stuff that San Francisco has done for the last several years. It's kind of like what they're running right now is a lot like what you see in the NFL. From the best offenses in the NFL, and it's physical, but it's not one-dimensional, and I think it's going to benefit that defense. But one of the things I'm going to write in a second, when I look at there's a lot of positives to take out of this spring, but there's some depth needs. Second string, you got to have more interior defensive line depth. I know. I thought Harmon did a good job today. Duce, the transfer from
Dowse.
It's pronounced Duce.
Dowse.
That's not what he says.
Ben just told me it's Dowse. But
that's not what that's not what everybody I've talked to on the football team says.
Right. Ben just told me it's Dowse, but
I don't trust Ben Flieger. Right. I like Ben Flieger, but I don't trust him.
I really don't know how he pronounces it. But go ahead.
Well, it's not.
It's not Dowse.
I think it's Duce, but I'm not gonna.
Daquan.
94.
94.
94 is a good football player.
He is.
Christian Phillips, that ankle, it's aggravated because he got driven. He got just manhandled by Daquan, our guy from Georgia Tech, and I've heard some good things about him from a lot of people. And sometimes in these scrimmage type things, you don't see the really good things from an interior defensive line, but he's got some strength to him, and he's got the ability to get upfield. And that guy was a positive today. Maverick Hansen's going to be Maverick Hansen. I have no worries about that.
And that's it. Those three.
What's after that? I think the Hartman kid that moved over there, I think he's okay. But you've got to have some. You got to have some functional. You got to have some functional depth at that position, and that's going to be really critical for Michigan State moving forward. I think I would like to see them maybe try to get a little bit more help in the defensive backfield if they can, maybe a corner, but definitely on the interior defensive line, because if you don't, then you're looking at okay, then you move Dunnigan in there, and
they're going to get two defensive tackles.
They have to.
In the portal. And Hartman is still on the offensive line. The defensive lineman is 75. I forget his name.
Ben Nelson.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. We get those. You know what? I want to give a shout-out to the walk-ons today because some of those guys looked really good. Cooper Terpstra, number 54, was really dang good. He was nasty. He
played guard today, right?
Yeah.
He's been playing center the
he
last
played
couple
center
weeks.
and guard today, and he was really good, and he was really physical. And
he looks like a scholarship guy.
And the Hartman kid, he was physical, and a lot of other guys out there.
Jacob Merritt, left tackle.
Jacob Merritt was really physical.
Well, they're operational.
Right.
They're functional.
But in this setting, usually you're used to seeing walk-ons and be like, oh, there's a walk-on, and really knowing it.
Remember, was it 2 years ago when they only had 6 offensive linemen in the program and they couldn't even do this in the spring?
Right, but these guys looked the part.
Functional, yeah.
They looked the part out there, and
they did a good job getting. I'll say this about Kapilovic: when it came time to replenish with walk-on offensive linemen, because they got stuck with no walk-on offensive linemen 24 months ago. That's why the spring was all messed up that year. When it came time to replenish with your scholarship offensive lineman, but also your walk-on offensive lineman, which is an important part that people overlook. They did a good job of bringing in those walk-on offensive linemen. They got some good ones right now.
Well, they paid them too. I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say it's too good a job. I mean, these guys are getting more money coming to Michigan State than they would have got if they would have gone to to a D2 school. So that helps. But kudos to those. I'm not going to say like props to Kvilipic for bringing them in. They needed to. That was a misfire not having those guys. And part of the reason was that first year they had so many, or the second year when they were good, they had so many upperclassmen. So really there wasn't really room for those guys. But
true.
it was short-sighted not to bring in. To wait a year after that before you brought those guys in. But I think one of the things everybody is on the same page in this. That's preaching this program. Jonathan Smith's own background is a former walk-on. The guys, going even on defense. Rossi's shown at Minnesota that he'll play a walk-on if they're good enough. Or so there's a lot of hunger and desire, and there's a lot of opportunity because those guys know that they're actually going to get a shot, and so they're going all in.
And I agree with what you're saying about if that's vanilla, then there's going to be even more spice coming up later because it was not just vanilla today. Right. Smith said they wanted to be vanilla, not show too much. But even like the first play of the second half when they scored the 75-yard touchdown, Schuster to Nick Marsh, defense came with a blitz and it's cover 3, and something about the way Michigan State these days with Smith, the way the passing attack, they want to stretch you vertically. That doesn't always mean they're throwing deep. It's the threat that it could be coming deep. So there might be a guy in a slot that's like running deep, and then you have like the crosser underneath it and dagger concepts, So you're taking that top off like you talk about. On this one, the timing of it, like the article you had about where Courtney Hawkins was talking about the steps and the timing of it, because if you're the fourth read, you may not need to get into your read right away. It needs to be at a certain timing. A good article that Paul wrote about Courtney Hawkins over at SpartanMag.com. By the way, give us a like on the channel here. Go to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. $1 for a month, you'll like it. If you're still with us talking Michigan State football, you'll love it. Go to SpartanMag.com. So the timing, the point at which those 2-on-1s present themselves to put someone in conflict, that happened first play of the second half. And it was, the good news is maybe the guy that bit on it is a true freshman safety, Jalen Thompson with a Y. True freshman mid-year enrollee. He rotated back to single. It's cover 3, so he's the guy in the middle. And he came up on a crosser right when Marsh was getting behind him. So he was presented with that conflict right on time, which is what Hawkins is talking about, but it's not vanilla at all. I mean, that's a concept. Right. It was a blitz, cover 3, and then a real play on the other side, and Marsh makes a play. It was entertaining, it was good football, but if that's just like scratching the surface of the vanilla part of it, there's going to be some interesting football plays to cover.
Remember, these Michigan State defensive backs have been presented with that all spring long. What happens when you're playing a team that hasn't been presented with that? I really like that. That's kind of more of the NFL type aspect of it, where not everyone's running breakneck to get their routes open. There's different layers to the onion. I think that you're going to see, like you're talking about, like we saw Marsh make several catches, or 2 catches in the middle of the field, and the scheme really creates a lot of that, and that was really positive.
So unofficially, Chiles was 7 out of 14 for 87 yards. Schuster 6 out of 9 for 134. Schuster looks like a good, solid, competent backup quarterback, and good job for Michigan State to go off and get a guy like that.
He's not a guy that you're going to fool with a blitz. Like he's one of those old, like the NFL quarterbacks that have been around for 15 years. And if they sniff it, he's an old, wily quarterback, and if there's anything out there that smells like a blitz or whatever, he's going to pick it up, and it's really tough, I think, for the defense when you've got a guy like that, because he's going right where he needs to go when that blitz is there, and that's something that is so valuable. One of the points I wanted to make in this VCast, and something that I've been thinking about a lot today, is you want to compare and contrast where Michigan State was at quarterback-wise when Jonathan Smith came into this program. Not a quarterback left in the cupboard, and now they're in a situation that's as good as I can recall in a long time with a tremendously talented young rising quarterback in Aidan Chiles, who has a chance to be one of the best in the country, NFL guy down the road. And then you've got one of the best veteran quarterbacks in the country, a guy that's happy to be home, happy to be playing back in the state of Michigan, a guy that has a ton of experience, a guy that's played probably in a lot of bad weather coming out of North Dakota, a guy that's, just accurate as heck. It's interesting in that deep ball he threw to Nick Marsh, because I wasn't sure about his arm strength.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's got a great arm, but he's got accurate.
Mm-hmm.
He's accurate as you could ever ask for, and he's got a strong enough arm to throw the deep ball with accuracy on a windy day in Spartan Stadium. And
a good brain.
This quarterback situation is really good, because I kind of like, watching you can pronounce Alessio's last name.
Milivojevic?
Yeah, okay. And then Rylan Jesse. I think those are, you got a couple good young quarterbacks. I think Alessio is a talented guy.
Mm-hmm.
But this quarterback situation is so starkly different.
They saved it.
Than it was. It's amazing. And you think back to D'Antonio, like what he inherited or whatever, but then, he brought in some 3 quarterbacks in that first recruiting class, essentially. I know Keith Nickel came in later, but, there's some parallels there. But this quarterback situation is so much better off than it was when they took over, and it's really impressive.
They took over, there were no quarterbacks in December. They all left, and there were no scholarship quarterbacks on campus for the first time since World War II.
I can think of a lot of guys, or a lot of programs that would love to have Tommy Schuster.
Sure.
That guy's...
Starting with the MAC schools in state that didn't recruit him out of high school.
Right. And
Oops.
But
he
what?
won a state title at Chippewa Valley. Didn't they win a state title? They were in the state title game, and he put up numbers and all that stuff. Goes North Dakota, does all those great things out there.
To the credit of the MAC schools, though, think of how many quarterbacks have come out of the MAC that Big Ten schools didn't recruit. So, it is what it is, and quarterback is probably the hardest position to get a scholarship at, because there's just so few jobs out there, and
some good ones.
A lot of guys, we've seen a lot of guys come through camp over the years that look the part of a Division I guy, and maybe are, but don't have the opportunities.
That was almost Kirk Cousins. So Schuster, a nice second stringer there. Michigan State did a great job. Whatever they did to scout him, or however the communication went on that's a plus to have him there, in reserve. Nick Marsh, 3 receptions, unofficially 103 yards, had that 75-yarder. What'd you think about Nick Marsh today?
I thought he was good. I liked it. I liked the deep ball for the touchdown, of course, but I think the element that's been missing at Michigan State for a lot of years, there really hasn't been a lot of consistency getting balls over the middle. I know Trey Mosley did a little bit, but that offense didn't really have a lot of balls over the middle. Not a lot of slants. Slant, I think is, I don't know. I've always liked the slant pass. I've always liked having the ability to get the ball in the middle of the field. I think when you do that, it shows some toughness of your receivers. But I liked his big body. Talking to Jason Killip, our recruiting writer, and Kenny Jordan, another guy that does a good job with the recruiting, that's covered Nick Marsh over the years. It's really impressive to me how much Nick Marsh has filled out in a year. You look at a year ago, you look at some of the pictures you see of him online, and he's so much smaller in those pictures than he is now, and he moves so well for being as big as he is. I know he was ranked really highly, but I think Nick Marsh is going to be a steal. I think they're going to do really big things with him here. I think Courtney Hawkins is a perfect guy for him, because Courtney Hawkins is this is his program. Like he said the other day, he put bricks in this program. And he's going to give everything he has to Nick Marsh, and I think it's going to be a really cool thing to watch him develop. I liked what I saw initially, and I also liked what I heard from Aidan Chiles afterwards, that, hey, Nick Marsh is doing it on talent right now. Our job is to get him out there and working and learning this offense so he can do it on more than talent. And
that was a veteran comment.
You can't ask for anything more than that. And then Chiles saying that, hey, I was doing the same thing last year. So but that's the kind of stuff you want to hear. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to hear like lip service. You want to hear like guys that are excited to get out there and work with them. And I think I think that receiver room, it's a good mix, having guys like a Montorie Foster, who's paid his dues, but he wants to help a guy like Nick Marsh along as well. I do think they could use some more help there.
Quindarius Dunnigan today, I thought, made a couple of plays, had a nice sack, and also had a nice tackle for loss later on. Defeated Brandon Baldwin for a sack. For a tackle for loss. Dunnigan looks like a nice player there, defensive end. I think they did a good job of identifying him. In addition to Dowse, those two guys are Duquan.
But you can move him inside and outside. I think that's the thing about Dunnigan that is. I think you're going to see some versatility. I think in the fall you'll see more of that.
I think he's inside on passing downs in the nickel.
But he looks big. I posted.
He's a bigger defensive end, and he wins with hands, but he's got some slipperiness.
Yeah, and it's different, man. Because I posted on the message board. I was watching him run around in pregame, and I'm like, man, he continues to, in my mind, look like a defensive tackle. but he does have some of the, he's got some of that Lawrence Thomas, a guy that could go inside and outside, and that's rare. You don't really find that a lot. You don't have guys that go inside or outside. You have guys that talk about going inside or outside, but he looks like a guy that I think you really could get that kind of versatility from.
And he beat Jacob Merritt for his sack. He was out there with the twos when he got that sack early on. As far as Dowse goes, he had a big tackle for loss down there in the goal line situation. 3rd and goal to 1 yard line, tackle for loss on Joseph Martinez, loss of 4. Going back and looking at that one, I think it looked like it was zone left, and I think that Lepo at right tackle had a false step the wrong way that opened up all that daylight.
That was fast. That happened fast.
He didn't beat anybody to do it. He was left unblocked. It was a mistake, and he goes in there and gets a tackle for loss on that. Lepo at right tackle, first string right tackle today. Michigan State needs to get better there. There's the Ethan, what's the guy's name from East Lansing?
Ethan Boyd.
Ethan Boyd, unavailable today. A lot of questions there. Lepo's first string right tackle for now.
I wonder about
Michigan State needs
the
to
guy
get
that
better
we
there.
don't talk about that we've been writing about like last year at this time like crazy, Stanton Ramil. Now he's a guy that was coming off an injury, and it'd be interesting to see what happens with him.
Yeah.
Luke Newman's a guy.
Ramil was in pads most of the spring, was not in pads today.
So I think like that guy was a guy that was people were talking about pushing for a starting job early in his career. Then he has the injury, is in the press box for the entire disaster season that was last year. And then you got Luke Newman, the kid from the FCS, who is out in the stands today.
Holy Cross. I like his film, man.
Right. And, so I think Michigan State's doing some things that they need to do to address some areas of concern.
And they'll need another one, too.
They probably will, but I like the coaching that's going on. I like some of the growth that's going on. And I just wonder about Stanton Ramil because, if he can get healthy and he can pick up what they want him to do blocking wise in this scheme, I think he could be a big part of an answer and not.
Is it out? Battery out? Or
it's going. We got a few minutes, but
okay.
It's going to go. But he could be part of the solution. When a guy gets injured, is out for an extended period of time, is not on the field, people stop talking about him. But he was the answer, quote air quotes, for the future at one of the tackle positions, and we haven't talked about.
Well, he had a chance. We still have never seen him really.
I understand it, but Kapilovic thought he was going to be a starter.
Yeah.
And a lot of other guys in the program thought he was going to be a starter. Defensive players believed in him, and it wasn't one of those deals, like the big kid that came in on the defensive line that sucked.
Tumise?
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Ramil, I'm intrigued to see what he can become because he's got a lot of tools, have not seen it yet. That would be a boost if he could come in and play some functional football. We don't really know right now. I was looking forward to seeing him today, and I was a little disappointed for him that he was not able to play today. Would have liked to have seen him play. Adamole Fileye, the tight end they got from Norfolk State last year. I talked about him last year. I'm like, don't expect much out of him. They went and got 3-4 tight ends. I'm like, he's not going to play. Watching him at Norfolk State, he was thin, he was awkward, he couldn't block, and he was kind of awkward catching the ball. They put some mass on him, and we've seen him catch some balls in practice. We've seen him catch some ball in scrimmages with the video that the university's released. Saw him in pregame today. Saw him targeted once. I think he caught one pass today. He looks like a tight end now. He dropped that one? He moves and looks like a tight end now, which I seriously 12 months ago, I mean, like, I don't, it's not, it's probably never, I was bearish on his chances, but he's developed. He's got a chance now.
I posted on the message board, and I said I didn't mean this to be disrespectful, but he's actually catching the ball with his hands now. He couldn't do that last year. So he's bigger. He's running decent routes. He's catching the ball with his hands. He looks athletic. So he looks. What I posted was he looks good against air today. So the next
that's
step,
progress.
And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right.
I thought tight ends did a nice job in the blocking department. We didn't talk about guys missing blocks or tight end blocking being poor. That's a win for this entire program because I'm tired of talking about bad tight end run blocking.
Been that way for 4 years, and then even a little bit in the end of the D'Antonio era too.
Exactly.
So Simeon Barrow moves on. That was big news this week. Surprise there. Did not practice all spring. He worked out and did stretching, but he was not in pads all spring. Just a precautionary thing. So LSU made Brian Kelly said we're going to be going after defensive tackles. And the Big Ten's the place to go get them because SEC teams cannot poach from other SEC teams at this time of year. It's a rule down there. So Michigan State going to lose Barrow, it looks like. Tough deal for Michigan State, but they're in the portal looking for other defensive tackles. We'll have coverage of that at SpartanMag.com, part of the On3 system, going forward into the spring as we continue to analyze today, the spring, and heading into the portal and recruiting and all the offseason stuff that happens with football these days. Anything else, Paul?
One last thing I wanted to mention, going back to the running back position, Brandon Tullis had a really good day. You don't usually see running backs get a lot of carries, and the ones that they get in the spring game, they tend to be negative carries, especially the young guys. He has a big head of steam. He got some good blocking, but he can put his foot in the ground. He can move you, and I really think that Keith Banoff's got a really good eye for running back talent. He does a really good job at developing those guys, and I expect the running back position to be a plus position for as long as he's here and as long as this program is emphasizing running the football the way they are.
Tullis will plant and get north, and so will the Frazier kid out of Texas.
Yeah.
Plant and get north, and that's
Nasty.
That's how they want to do it in this scheme. And Tullis basically repped as the number 2 running back today behind Nathan Carter. He was the second guy to get carries in the second offense, then Berger after him. Berger's been productive in some ways in the past, but he's got to keep proving it.
Berger had a really good run today where he was actually physical, where he pushed his way to the goal line. Now, that wasn't necessarily him, but he's patient enough to let the blocking helped him get there. But I think he knows the score. I think he knows what he has to do, and I've heard nothing but decent things about Berger in comparison to what I usually hear about Berger. So that's a good thing. Don't know about Davion Prim. He can catch the ball. I think he's a decent athlete, but the amount of running backs that Michigan State's taking a look at.
Number situation.
Right.
If he wants to be a running back,
and they know what they want.
Other
KB
opportunities
knows
somewhere.
what he wants. Michigan State knows what they want at running back, and I can tell they like some big physical backs.
Yeah.
And
Michigan State is active in the portal right now for running backs.
Exactly. So that makes me wonder if they think some of those guys are going to jump ship. But
Me too.
I think that's one of those deals where I mentioned before that everyone's saying that Jonathan Smith is 3 steps ahead of everybody. I think he knows the score as well.
And you know what? They say he's 3 steps ahead of everybody, and you hear people talk about how competitive he is.
Yeah.
And I believe it, but he doesn't really exude that.
No, but I think
Isn't that
that's
interesting?
what makes him effective. I mean, the people that really are 3 steps ahead of you, it's like in poker, man. If I'm playing poker and someone tells me every time they bluffed, well, so what? I know you did. I'd rather be looking at someone where maybe I'm underestimating them, or they're a little quiet about it. The sneaky quiet ones are the ones you got to worry about.
Smith, he's a pretty slick cat.
He is.
And we'll be checking out the program throughout the offseason. SpartanMag.com. Get over there for all the coverages, analysis, offseason, recruiting, all the stuff. Check it out. $1 per month. You'll love it. Anything else? For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. Been watching the VCast from Spartan Stadium with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.